This video was published by mbkpinternational.com. In this video, we're going to talk about adjusting the blade height or the cutting depth on the Guillotine XPC19 Pro. And this is basically if you're cutting a stack of paper and it doesn't cut through the bottom sheets of paper. It doesn't fully cut through the stack. There's a few pages left that were on the bottom that's not cut. And typically the reason why that happens is because you have a dull blade. So if you've, the first thing you want to do is change your blade. Put a new blade in there. If you sharpen the blade, that's going to shorten your blade when you sharpen it, and it's going to cause this problem too. So if you sharpen it, it will shorten the blade, and you're going to have to do this adjustment with the screws I'm going to show you here. But if you do a new blade in it and it's still not cutting through it, you need to do one or two of these adjustments. First thing you're going to do is, it's a simple one. Hit the set button, and you can see the deep setting here. This one's on 0. We typically like to send them out new with it on 00. You can change this deep setting, although it actually goes up to 31, but you do not want to set it that high on this particular machine. 15 is the highest you want to go. So if it depends on how many pages it's not cutting through, I would start with just like going to, you just hit the set button a second time and it will highlight the deep, then you just go to like 0, 5 or something like that and hit enter. Now if you go back to it, you can see it's on 5 now. And that will allow the blade to come down just a little bit lower to cut those bottom pages. If it's just like 2 or 3 pages, 4 pages that's not being cut. You can, again, you can go a little bit more. If it doesn't still quite do it, you can go up to 15, as high as 15. Do not go over 15, or it could, for some reason it puts stress on your main board and it can burn out your main board. So do not go over 15. I like to keep them on 0 when we send them out, because they will eventually, the blade gets a little dull over time, and sometimes it doesn't cut through the bottom sheets, and you can adjust it very easily like this. So I'm going to put it back to 0 for now. That's one way you can do it. That's a quick and easy way. If that is not enough, like if you're not cutting through 30 pages of paper or something like that, then that's not going to help you. That's only going to help you if you got maybe 10 sheets or 15 sheets of paper that's not cutting through. So if it's cutting, like I say, 30 pages or something like that, you're going to have to do this other setting. The first thing you want to do is, you're going to turn off your cutter, and you're going to remove this top crown to do this other adjustment. There's 2 screws there I've already removed, 2 on the other side, just to make this quicker. And you just lift this straight up, and you can keep lifting and this will unplug itself, or you can kind of rest it there and just unplug it yourself. And then just take this and move it out of the way. Now I'm going to turn the cutter back on. You allowed about 10 seconds for the paper push to calibrate itself. Since the crown's not gone, it delays it. Or since the crown is gone. Okay, the paper push just did its thing. It moved. Once that's done, you can kind of do. Basically, what you're doing here is there's three hex screws on top here. There's one. You look for these 3 holes. One in the center, and another one over here. So there's 3 of them there. And you can just, before you do this, just make sure all your screws are tight. Nice and tight. This is a 10mm socket. If you don't know what this is, if you don't got one of these T-ridges, you can use a 10mm socket. Just make sure all those are tight. There's another one back here, but it's not necessary to get it right now. And then just make sure that all these are snug tight, because if they're loose, you want to tighten them up and get it to where these basically are screws that push down on top of the blade, and they'll push the blade down. Okay, but when it's tight, it won't push the blade down. So you just want to make sure they're nice and snug against the blade. All 3 of them. Once you make sure they're all snug against the blade, now what you can do is you can drop the blade by pushing the cut buttons about 2 inches. Just let it go after it goes down about an inch or so, and then loosen this one about a quarter of a turn to half a turn. And then, I mean, you can do it. You can leave it here right now and just do them all that way. Loosen them all about a quarter to half a turn. You want to loosen them just enough to where when you tighten these, it will actually push the blade down. But you don't want to loosen them so much that the blade will fall down on its own, because then you're going to have to lift it up. You don't want it to fall down on its own. You want it to only be pushed down. So about a quarter to half a turn on each one is all you need. And actually there's one went behind there, so I do have to raise it back up. You can just feel it whether it's getting loose or not. So somewhere between quarter to half turn. And then once that's done, you can start tightening these. I'm not going to do it on this because it's already, this one's adjusted good. But you just start turning this thing, and you may be able to, you'll see if you get close on it. I'm not going to do it here, but you can watch it closely. You can see a line there, and just, as you turn that, you can see this just move down just a hair. And you want to do them equal. You know, if you do whatever you can get in here, about a quarter of a turn each time. You know, quarter of a turn, quarter of a turn, a quarter of a turn, and it just depends on how much you need. You know, how many sheets are not being cut through. You know, so basically, just you can do it maybe a two quarter turns, or a half a turn, or maybe in a full turn on each one, but do it equally on all three. And once you do that, you can tighten these back up. Again, it depends on how much you need, how much it's not cutting through, depending on how much you need to adjust. But I wouldn't do more than maybe a half a turn at any time before you tighten these back up, and then do a test cut. So basically, once you do that turn at half at the most, quarter to half, on all three of these, it should push the blade down slightly equally across, and then you can get all these tight. And you can get the one behind there tight too. Sorry. Don't forget this one behind here, because if it gets loose, it comes and hit that and mess up your machine. So the most important ones to make sure are always tight are the two end ones, because that will go behind that side. And now you can do a test cut and see if it cuts through the pad. And when you're doing test cuts, use a full ream of paper, and because that way you know if it's cutting through the whole thing properly. Use a full ream and do a test cut. You can shave off a quarter of an inch at a time each time you do it, and just make sure it cuts through all the paper. Only do as much adjustment as you need to cut through that full stack. You don't want to do more than what's needed. That's why you should probably only do about a quarter turn or half a turn at most, starting with the first one. Then do more. If it still doesn't cut through it, you can see about how much it changed, how much more you got, and from that you can tell about how much more you need to do, how many more turns you need to do on each one of these top screws. Once you're done with that, you can turn off your cutter. You can put your crown back on and plug it back in there. Have someone plug it in and put the crown back in place, and put your screws back in place. But I think that's it. Just make sure you get all your screws tight. The end ones too, the one behind here and there, and those should be snug if you're doing tightening down. And again, if I didn't say it, you'd want to set your deep setting back to 0 before you do this, because it's best to have it on 0 and then have it cutting perfect. That's basically it. This video was published by mbkpinternational.com.